Sonny Dykes clapped back at all of his haters on Saturday, and that may even include me. Oh yeah, it's Locked On Horned Frogs. Play my music.
You are Locked On Horned Frogs, your daily podcast on the TCU Horned Frogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On Horned Frogs podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything TCU athletics, Monday through Friday. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I, of course, am Darrion Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South and Everydayers. Remember, just because the mic cuts off does not mean that the journey is over. It just means it's time to follow me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Starts with an S and ends with an S. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, and right now, new customers can bet just $5. And if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download the app today. We'll close out with how TCU needed this win over Baylor. And I mean that on multiple fronts. Fan base, team, jobs, right? Season. You needed this win, and the Frogs got it. In segment 2, we'll take a look at the last 3 minutes of the game. And I know most of you didn't get a chance to see the last 3 minutes of the game, but I got 3 words that will break down that segment. But let's kick this whole thing off with the same way that Sonny Dykes kicked off his post-game press conference, and that's with clapping back at all the haters on Saturday after beating Baylor. And it wasn't the very first thing that he said, but what I'll say is Sonny Dykes, to me, seemed like a man on a mission, a man who heard all of the noise, and a man who wanted to clap back at any critic that he may have. I said that may include me because I talked about the job security of Sonny Dykes on multiple occasions last week. This was a hot button topic. And did I call for his job? No, I didn't. Did I grade his hot seat? Yes. Did I say it was mild? No. So I can understand how I may fall in that category. But Sonny Dykes, to me, was a man on a mission in that post-game press conference, and he had something he wanted to get off his chest. Because in my opinion, he went out there and he started breaking down the game, and in mid-thoughts, he pivoted to something completely different. In no way did he need to tell us about his track record at TCU. That was not a necessary statement. That was not a relevant statement, in my opinion. You could say that the comment he made about this team knowing how to win, that was relevant because they were in a tough game. They were in a game that got closer than you expected towards the end. Saying that this team knows how to win was logical. But when he starts talking about we're the winningest team in the Big 12 in the last 3.5 years, that's when I think he begins to drop his nuts on the table. And I'm sorry, that's the only way I know how to say it. But that's what I believe that he did because he wanted to tell everybody, do not forget who I am. Sonny Dykes, after the game against Baylor, yeah, he talked briefly about it, but in his opening statement, he did not wait for a question to be asked. In his opening statement, he began to rattle off his track record. And my only question is why? It's not relevant. It doesn't matter. The reason he did it, and I would love to know what you may think, the reason Sonny Dykes came in that post-game press conference, the reason he came into that post-game press conference and told us about the winningest team and what he's done in the last 14 games is because he wanted everybody to know, y'all need to cut out this talk about me losing my job. I think Sonny Dykes wanted to tell you, me, anybody who's making decisions, any fan that was listening, this is my job. And if you cut me, if you release me, if you let me go, you're losing a really good coach. Let's not let what happened last week, or I think in his mind, he would phrase it that way, but let's not let what happened last week kind of distract you from the facts. Let's not let that happen. And do I completely agree with him? Not completely, but as somebody who would be campaigning for himself, fighting for himself, advocating for himself, what Sonny Dykes did on Saturday, I think made a lot of sense. And I do not think it was as simple as I heard noise and I want to shut it up. I think it's I'm delivering a message as well. Like that's both sides of it, because we try to sit here and we try to talk about these coaches and we talk about these players. And oftentimes I just think sports are entertainment. And sometimes these guys are entertainers or looked at as entertainers, but they're people. and they hear the things that we say. They hear the comments, and they like to pretend as if they block out all of the noise. But let me tell you what, I've never believed that. Never. And Sonny Dykes' press conference told me everything I needed to hear. He heard the noise. How could he not? Everybody was clamoring. Man, you need to cut Sonny Dykes. After TCU lost to Kansas State, I heard more cut Sonny Dykes, let go of Dykes than I ever have. I've never heard that much. And I'm sure he hadn't heard it that much either. Because when he comes back and wins this game, he doesn't tell you about how, man, Baylor's a good team. We really were gutsy. He tells you about what he's done in his entire tenure. His entire tenure. Okay. I hear you loud and clear. I hear you loud and clear, Sonny. Now, let me tell you exactly what he said. And I'm not going to play the whole thing because, unfortunately, I do not have rights to this. But I definitely suggest that you go and find Sonny Dykes' post-game press conference against Baylor. And all you have to do is watch the first maybe 2 minutes of that press conference. He begins to talk about the Baylor game a little bit, but there hits a point where he interrupts his own thoughts and he pivots to tell you that we are the most winningest team in the Big 12 in the last 3.5 years. Just so you know that. What? Just so everybody knows that. Do you understand? Like, listen, I talk for a living. And when I'm not making a living, I'm still talking quite a bit. Okay? Ask anybody who's close to me. I'm a yap my life, folks. Like, I am. All right? When you say just so you know that, there's a certain level of attitude that comes with that statement. When you add that to the end of a fact, if you end that to the end of a statement, it is an emphasis. You are emphasizing whatever it is that you're trying to say. You are trying to set the record straight. You are saying, let's get this clear. This is my body of work. Let's not ever get it confused. Now, the pushback that I would have is I still think some of the arguments, I still think some of the criticism that fans have is valid. I still think wanting more is valid. I've said it before. I'll say it again. While I do respect what Coach Dykes did after the press conference and letting everybody know about his track record, I would remind him about his statement. And his statement is that a season that was similar to last year would be a disappointment. And in my opinion, you are on the way there. I do not believe that he is a victim of making it to the national championship game in year one. I think that Sonny Dykes is a victim of Sonny Dykes' own standards. He set the bar. He set the bar. Now he must reach that bar. Otherwise, that would be 2 disappointing seasons in 4. And some could argue that last year was disappointing as well because you didn't really pick it up until late. The problem with TCU is not that they're 5-2, in my opinion, right? Like, we can use Dykes' words, but my problem is not that TCU is 5-2. My problem is that how you lost those 2 games was crippling. That's the thing. But I don't think Dykes cares about that, and he shouldn't. Right? The thing he said is, exact quote is, we're the winningest team in the Big 12 the last 3.5 years. Just so everyone knows that. He goes on to say that this win wasn't pretty, but he doesn't care because the objective was to win. Then he says, you got to get better and whatnot. But he goes and tells you that he's 11-3 in the last 14 games. Why after one game? Why after one game versus Baylor is Coach Dykes telling me all of this? This is not an end of season review. This is not a bye week. TCU just beat Baylor. And immediately after the game, Coach Dykes told me about his track record over the last 14 games, over the last 3.5 years, and told everybody straight up, said, just so you know, we are the winningest team in this conference since I've been here. If that doesn't sound like a man who heard all of the noise, heard all of the chatter, heard people calling for his job, and wanted to clap back to every single one of them in one fell swoop, I don't know what it sounds like. And I say I may be in that because I touched on that topic multiple times. I did. And I thought it was a great topic to talk about. And I don't think that conversation is over. That's the thing. Yes, you won today. You won on Saturday in a 7-hour game, right? You beat Baylor, but I think there's still more tests coming up. And if TCU can beat an Iowa State, if they can beat a BYU on the road, if they can knock off a Cincinnati, like if they can come in and have a fast ending to their season, the same way they had last year, then I think we'll be talking about this a lot differently. But this conversation is not over. Sonny Dykes may not want to talk about it anymore. He may not feel like it's a valid conversation to have. He may feel like he has built up enough of a track record to where talking about his job security is disrespectful. And you know what? I think there's a section of people who would agree with him. There's a section of people who would disagree with him. So I will not say that he's all wrong. But what I will say is this conversation is far from over. It just is. But let's not get it twisted. He came on a mission. He was puffing his chest out, and I respect it. I respect it, okay? Just so you know, they are 13-2 in 2022, if you go everything. 12-0 regular season, 13-2. 5-7 the year after, 9-4 the year after, 5-2 so far this year. They're 32-16. So they are 32-16. That is a solid record like this. That you have been successful. I give you that. Yeah, I don't have any disagreement. That was a frustrating. I'm new to TCU, admittedly. That sounded like more frustration than I've heard from him all year. And I've seen you give up losses to Arizona State. I've seen you get beat bad by Kansas State. It felt like he had more spark in this matchup or after this matchup than he had in either of those other two. Let me know if I'm wrong. I'm sure you listen to Dykes' comments more than I have. This to me sounded like a very frustrated version of him. Maybe not the most frustrated that you've ever seen being here for years, but it's the most frustrated I've seen being here for a month and a half. We just passed the month anniversary of this show. Anyway, let's keep pushing. Let's keep pushing because the last 3 minutes of this game had it a little bit shaky, but I got 3 words to describe those times. And if you didn't watch it, if you weren't able to see it, well, even more reason for you to understand these 3 words as you continue with Locked On Horned Frogs. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, and we have a double header for Monday Night Football tonight. You have the Texans and Seahawks a little bit later at 9 o'clock. Shout out to the West Coast. And then you have you have the Lions and Buccaneers at 6 o'clock. So that's 2 opportunities for you to make a little bit of extra cash on the last day of football for the week. I think that these are going to be fantastic games, to be honest. I think that the Lions and Bucks is going to be an absolute banger. I think that you're going to want to watch it and hopefully make a little bit of money off of it as well, because you're looking at a game between 2 high-profile quarterbacks. You have the Jared Goff, you have the Baker Mayfield hype. I think both of these guys are living it up. Talk about passing yards. I would go with a sure thing, $5. $5 on a sure thing, and then if you hit, you get $300 back in bonus bets, so you can be a little bit riskier. That's just a little bit of advice for you, but go to FanDuel and download the app and use it today. Today's episode is also brought to you by Quo, and one of the tools that helps make a huge difference for business owners is Quo. You may know it as Open Phone, but not any longer. It's the same great business phone system that you've heard me talk about before. You just have a different name. That's the only thing that's changed. But the same reliable service and same usefulness is still there. Now, I'm going to put you in the seat of somebody who's trying to get a service. You pick up your phone. You call. Voicemail. Sorry, you've reached. You hang up. You don't even let them get to the number. And what do you do after? I can guarantee that 9 out of the 10 people who are listening to this do not say, I'll call back in 15 minutes, unless you know that person already. If you're trying to get a first-time service and they don't answer, you're going to the next person. And as a business owner, that's something that you cannot afford. Quo helps you avoid that. So see why over 90,000 businesses trust Quo, formerly Open Phone, and get started free. Get 20% off your first 6 months at quo.com/lockedoncollege. That's QUO.com/lockedoncollege. And if you got existing numbers with another service, Quo will port them over for you at no extra charge. No missed calls, no missed customers. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked On Horned Frogs, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day. For your second listen, make sure you're checking out Locked On Big 12, because they're going to cover everything that's going on in this week of action, both in recap and in preview. You have TCU Baylor, interesting game. Utah versus BYU, interesting game. Arizona State knocked off Texas Tech, a matchup that not enough people talked about, but that is down goes Tech. So it's a very interesting week in the Big 12. Now, that being said, I have 3 words to describe the final 3 minutes of the TCU versus Baylor game. And the final score did not necessarily feel reflective of how the game went. But a large percentage of why the final score was the final score is that last 3 minutes. Now, many of you, and I didn't either, and I tried to go onto the ESPN app and try to catch the replay, and it just wasn't letting me get there. I was able to find a highlight from, I don't know where I found it, but it was kind of a full game highlight. It wasn't every single play, but I was able to catch the big moments. That final 3 minutes was hectic, and no one really got to see it. So when I told you that this was going to be a great game that no one was going to be able to see, I didn't expect to have 1 million minutes of rain delay. I didn't expect for this game to go on for 6 hours. I think it was the game started at 11, and I don't think it ended till like 5. I don't think so. It was around that, but you could have drove from Waco to Fort Worth if you wanted to. Like, you really could have in the time that it took to finish this game. But the point is that the game took forever. And through 57 minutes of the game, TCU had a commanding control of this matchup, right? It was 42-21. There was absolutely no question of who the better team was that day. There was no question of who was going to win. Now, with 30 seconds left, the conversation was much different, because now instead of being up 21, you're up 6. And it was a rough way to get there. And Coach Dykes described it as 3 catastrophic mistakes on offense, defense, and special teams. That's rare that you have that type of mistake in every single aspect of the game, but TCU had it. And in addition to having those, it made the game much more competitive. And I got 3 words. You got scary, concerning, and encouraging. Now, encouraging feels like the odd man out the bunch, but I'm going to get into why at the end, of course. For those who weren't able to see it, who didn't go catch any of those highlights, basically what happened, and these are some of the catastrophic mistakes that Dykes was talking about, is on offense, Josh Hoover took a read option and he ended up fumbling. And that apparently was not supposed to be the call. I didn't think anything of it because I feel like Hoover has good mobility. And I thought it'd been a good play to kind of catch people guessing. You were running the ball really well all day. I would assume that Hoover pulling would have had more space. It didn't. Excuse me. Sorry. It didn't have more space, but I would have assumed it was going to be more room for him to run. It wasn't. The ball got hit out, and Baylor returned it for a touchdown. And then TCU on the next drive had an unnecessary roughness that Dykes thought was pretty ticky-tacky. But it had an unnecessary roughness. I wasn't even able to see that on my highlight, so I can't comment on it. But it puts you in a 1st and 25. So, of course, you go 3 and out on that drive. You get the ball back to Baylor. Baylor puts together a string of really nice passes. I feel like Michael Trigg finally came alive. Let's see what Trigg's last stat line was, or final stat line was. Trigg ended up Michael Trigg had 3 catches for 56 yards. And I feel like every single one of those catches came on that last or second to last drive for Baylor. Let me see. Because he didn't really do that much, in my opinion. Let's see. Pass incomplete, catch for 11 yards. No, that was it. There's just one drive. He must have had on that other one. Yes, he had a 36-yard catch on the other one. Well, it ended up being late. That's the point. The point is, by the time that Baylor was really making moves, really being able to catch up, that's when they first got Trigg activated. So he had, in 3 minutes and 59 seconds, he had a 36-yard catch, and he also had an 11-yard catch. So just not a lot of movement for the best offensive weapon on that team. And that's a good thing for TCU. If you can keep him a 3 for 50-something, that's good. If you can keep him quiet until the game's really out of reach, that's even better. He was a non-factor in this game. And that's something that TCU's defense has to really take credit for. They did a really good job. And I understand that some of the passes he could have caught, but in totality and everything taken into account, I think TCU did a good job on Trigg, in my opinion. But you had a fumble return for a touchdown. You had a string of really good passes by Baylor. He called the fade route a catastrophic mistake. And then you let up an onside kick. So, Manjack, that was another bad hands moment by him. These things start to catch up with you a little bit. The calls for him to put on gloves are going to be significantly louder moving forward, I think. But the point is that You had 3 catastrophic mistakes that Dykes said could have been an avalanche. And this is where the 3 words come into play. So scary in the sense that in real time watching it, you have to be worried that a collapse is on the way. Like maybe you feel like after that touchdown, it's like, oh, whatever, man. 6 points, we're going to go ahead and get this and kneel it out. But then they get the onside kick. And when the onside kick coming, that's the heartbeat. All right. Just so it's like, why is he just keep hitting the mic? That's the heartbeat speed number. First year, you're cool. Then you kind of pick it up a little bit, like, oh, okay, they're 6 points away. And then when they get the onside kick, beating through your chest. The heartbeat is beating through your chest. That's the scariness of it. The live, real-time aspect of sitting here thinking about the Arizona State game. Because that would be the first thing that's on my mind is, man, we had this game, and we end up having bad moments. You just had a fumble return for a touchdown. Improbable. The Baylor touchdown isn't improbable. You know Sawyer Robertson is a good quarterback. You know that he can turn it on at any moment, right? And I think the fact that you just had that drive feels like, oh, they're starting to put it together. And it's only 6 points. It's only 6 points. So if you score this touchdown, you kick the extra point, you're green. It's a touchdown, and Baylor's winning this game on a walk-off. You begin to feel that. I've been there. It doesn't matter if you like the team, believe in the team, whatever. When things like this happen, you begin to say, oh, it might not be our day. This might not be this might be their moment to rise. And that's kind of what it felt like to me on second watch, on highlight watch, I guess, because I knew the outcome. But yeah, that's the scary aspect of it. It's concerning in the sense that you really just want to see them finish the game strong. You know, I'm not gonna harp on this, but you do want to see TCU finish. And I feel like they finished against Baylor. I do not feel like they finished today. So that's a little bit concerning because I want to be able to keep your foot on a team's neck and just kind of finish them, close them out, because this is in other circumstances, this could be really bad. The inability to make plays late could be bad. Now it's encouraging because you made it out. You rebounded. You responded. You did make a play when the defense needed you, right? Because the defense played well pretty much all game. Don't let the 36 points fool you. I thought they did a good job against the Stars. I thought they did a good job against Sawyer in general because Cam Stewart, host of Locked On Baylor, we collabed on the post game, or not the post game, but the crossover on Thursday. He said this was arguably Sawyer's worst performance in a Baylor uniform. That's what he said on the post game show. So this to me is a scenario where the defense did really good. They forced into 3 interceptions, and you closed out the game with an interception. Close out a game with an interception. So to me, there's an encouraging aspect of knowing how to respond and rising to the occasion that we won't talk about often. You don't ever want to have to rise to the occasion in that case, but you did, and they did. So that's something that I think should be noted. Now, moving forward, I can tell you about how they just needed this. I'm gonna sit back, I'm gonna relax, I'm gonna come back real comfy, and I'm gonna tell you about how this was a matchup that TCU simply could not afford to lose as we continue with Locked On Horned Frogs. Let's be honest. Most of us can't name all of our financial accounts, let alone what we're worth. I mean, 401k, savings, investments. It does become easy to lose track, especially when you're having 5 apps to try to discover where you're spending, how much you should be saving, how much you're investing, what your 401k look like. When you have all those apps and when you have all these accounts that you don't follow, it gets easy to lose money and leave money on the table. I don't really particularly like doing either one of those things, and I don't think that you do either. And that's why Monarch Money is so helpful, because it's helped me organize my accounts, track my spending, get a better handle on my investments. And I know that I've been doing a little bit too much spending going out to eat. All right, let's dial that back, eat in the house a little bit. It's really that simple sometimes. Don't let the financial opportunity slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarch.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarch.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. As we're wrapping up today's episode of Locked On Horned Frogs, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day, making all the way to segment 3, and I thank you 2 times for that. Thank you. Thank you. Now, this is the game. I told you I'm going to sit back. I'm going to relax. Let's get comfy. No notes here. Let's just talk emotions, right? No stats, no anything. This is a game that TCU needed. They had to win this game for a lot of reasons. Jobs on the line, seasons on the line, team morale, fan base, everything. You needed this because you lose this game, you're now 3 losses in conference play. And I think that's it for you. Baylor's there. You get a little bit of satisfaction, extra satisfaction, probably 2 cherries on top because you put you put the nail in the coffin for your rival. TCU is trying to avoid being where Baylor is right now. I talked about this on maybe Thursday and Friday. Talked about this on Thursday and Friday. Whoever lost this game, their season was kaput. Their season was over. Finito. It's done. And TCU still alive. TCU is still alive because they were able to win this game. TCU is still alive, and that is the most important thing. When I say that TCU needed this, you can argue me to death about all the other aspects that I'm going to say. You may feel like that's not valid. You may feel like that wouldn't have happened. You like all these other things is me going through hypotheticals and me projecting on what I think could have happened if they lost. And in the words of Kanye West, I guess we'll never know. But one thing I can say for certain, your season's over. 3 losses. You drop down to 4-3, it's over for you. Season's over. Jobs, maybe. Team morale, maybe. Fan base, probably. Fan base was already turning against you after Kansas State. You needed to bounce back. I think the team needed to see themselves bounce back. Not because they were losing confidence, but after a game like that, you needed to respond. You needed to get that taste out of your mouth. And I believe that TCU did that successfully. Was it pretty? No. Do I care as much as Sonny Dykes? Probably more. I think in the moment, Sonny Dykes said, we won. Like that, we won. And this is our rival. We don't care. We won. And that's the only thing that really matters. And it is. And then he immediately talked about how there's things that they need to improve. So it's not like it was far from his mind. I just think it was I probably wouldn't have said I didn't care. But I think that's because I wasn't in battle. So I think that's different. But jobs, I don't know. The seat is heating up for Sonny Dykes if you lose this game. To Baylor again? I don't remember the last time TCU lost to Baylor back-to-back. Did it happen there in the Art Browse era? Let's see. Let's scoot up and see TCU Baylor history. But it doesn't happen often. Like you just don't. Here we go. Man, they're really trying to. No, I want the history. Yeah, give me the history, and I'll go straight to the TCU Athletic website. All right. Yeah, you got to go back to 2014, 2013 since the last time that TCU lost to Baylor in back-to-back weeks. Hey, 58, 61, and 14. I told you that. I'm talking about one of them classic 2010s games. That's what I was talking about. That's what I thought we'd get. 50 to 48, 38. You know what? All these classic shootouts, TCU's on the wrong side of. I'm glad they didn't have that. I'm looking at all these high-profile or high-scoring games. TCU is on the losing end. Except for now. Technically, this was a high-scoring game. But anyway, the point is, I don't know what happens with Sonny Dykes. I don't think he gets fired. I do agree with him. He says he has a track record. He has a good track record. 11-3 in the last 14 games. I get it. So I don't think he gets fired, but I do think that seat gets really hot. I do think you start to say, all right, are you going to beat quality teams? What's going on here? All right, you feasted on a bunch of unranked teams. You ain't won a ranked game in 2 years, 3 years now at this point, 2.5. Or I think like those things come into play. All that's done. You just beat your rival. And you had a pretty good game. Game got close to the end, but it was a pretty good game. Team morale, like I said, you just need to win. You just need to see it. So I'm not gonna beat this point. Fans, I think fans would have checked out if you lost to Baylor. I really do. I think that if you lose to Baylor, everybody's like, all right, I'm done. I'm over it now. But we're not. And we're here on Locked on Horned Frogs. And we're ready to talk about the return of the back part 2 on tomorrow. Tuesday. All right. Part Tuesday. Yeah. Didn't really hit the same, but it's okay. I'll come back with better jokes tomorrow. Or maybe I'll just come back with no jokes. I think that's the better idea. No joke Tuesday. So until the next time that we hear each other, family, take care. Next time we see each other, take care. Stay blessed. Peace.